Hey, ex-listener, welcome. We're about to get this started in a couple of minutes, but if you have any questions or things to add at the moment, and if you're real, I hope you are, go ahead and just request to speak and I'll put you on. And I appreciate you being here. I'm just waiting for a couple of people to join that I know are about to. Hey there, can you hear me?
Hi, Patrick.
Yeah, hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you. I'm a real person, so don't worry. But I'm not sure if the topic is really my kind of topic.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you're here. Do you know anything about me?
Well, I've been following you a little bit in a distance when replying. Uh, I think we have the same. How do you say it? Standards, because you're American, right?
Yeah, where are you from?
Belgium.
Wow, I've been to Belgium. You guys are about as tall as anybody I've seen around the globe, quite frankly.
I think you are confusing us a little bit with the Dutch people.
Oh, so the Belgian people, even though you guys are that close, don't share the same height?
No, I think the Dutch are still taller. Normally, I
Interesting.
think, yeah, it's a different kind of people also.
You're Flemish and they're right.
Yeah,
Interesting, interesting. That is so cool. Well, now please continue. It looks like we've got some other folks that have joined on. It's so great to have all of you, and I hope you guys all chime in. But I'm just connecting with somebody who has joined us from Belgium at the moment.
yes, that's Mr. X.
So tell us about your perspective and kind of you said you've been following me from kind of a distance, but what are our shared
Well, we have gigantic political changes happening right now worldwide, which affects us all.
Absolutely.
So the topic is really hot everywhere in every country. So, and when you are on the social media, you immediately see which people are thinking the same way you are thinking, or are following a certain kind of logic and common sense, and
Sure.
which aren't. And so automatically you connect more with the people that think the same way. And luckily, it's still more than the negative people. I will simplify those people by reducing them to being negative or something. But there are not so many, but their impact is very big.
Well, when I
And
when I think about your neck of the woods, your geopolitics and the history of that era, particularly post World War II, or I should say during World War II, you've had a front row seat to the carnage and the absolute cataclysm of fascism and the consequences. And so you bring an historical perspective that I would hope that those that are on this call from North America might be able to also feel from you. So, what I tend to say often is that corruption births and fuels fascism. And what I've been able to both delve into deeply is the nature of systemic corruption in the United States, which is tremendous. But it's also not, of course, just the United States. It's a global problem, and it has been for some time. Now, granted, a lot of it has emanated from my country and had influence all over the world. Everybody has their own special brand of it. But I'm curious when you kind of consider your upbringing and your geographical perspective, your historical perspective. when you hear somebody on the other side of the pond, per se, say something as transparent as our country is absolutely monumentally corrupt, but it's led to literally what is now a fascist hijacking of the United States, which I don't think anybody in the United States or around the world could have ever fully appreciated until we saw it happen in the way that it's happening in the past couple of weeks. Do you have any comments on what I've just laid out?
Yes, I do. Because it affects, like I said, it affects us all, and everything is connected. So let me get back to the World War II. After World War II, of course, capitalism was a very good system to rebuild the whole world, because the whole world was practically needed to be rebuilt, and the sky was the limit, and it seemed to be a very good system, and it worked a very long time. But I think we have come to the point where we see the negative sides of it also, and we need to adapt the economical system to the new findings we have on that same system. And we have separated in the Middle Ages the church and the state, and now we need to separate economy and state. I see economy as it's not a goal on itself. It's like, for me, it's more like a means to get to a goal, but it's not now it's working as a goal on itself, and that's the negative part, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because the whole impetus behind the Clean New Deal is to lay out the reality of what our country has become and how it became this way by revealing the blueprint of how it works that all of mainstream media in the United States is completely obfuscated intentionally, because unfortunately, no matter what side of the ideological fence they appear to be, they all are getting paid by it, which I believe a lot of people mistakenly decry as capitalism. Now, let me just lay out a little bit of my argument here and see how it lands with you, and then I'm going to try to get some other people in the conversation here. What I argue is that we actually have socialism for the robber barons. And the way you get there is to understand my work, The Con, which is the blueprint of what is control fraud meets modern executive compensation, which pretty much manifests the United States in our global sphere, if you will, what we called globalism going back to the 80s. But it's just gotten progressively more adept, intense, and corrupt, that has destroyed the government of, by, and for the people, which you appropriately and correctly define as what our government was fenced in to do initially, right? Particularly going back to the World War II era, which we borrow a kind of an inspiration in borrowing from to create the Clean New Deal, because the New Deal was what, and I put in quotes, saved the United States capitalism. And this was what was obviously stated publicly by Franklin Delano Roosevelt many times. He said that he saved the United States and capitalism from itself. And there's a fine line between capitalism and criminality when you gut the law and you have consequences for breaking the law. And that's what we've been in the midst of for the course of the last, quite frankly, 30 years. We call it the 3Ds, which are deregulation, desupervision, but more importantly, decriminalization. And what that means is that years and years ago, over a decade ago, literally going back to the 80s, maybe the early 90s, if you want to put it in the Clinton administration, but it starts as far back as the Reagan administration. But we defanged the law for corporate America. But what people did not understand throughout this entirety of the process, now, many people might recognize that we had the savings and loan crisis, we had the Enron era frauds, we had the tech bubble fraud, and then we, of course, had the great financial crisis, and then we've had the last 14 years. But all of these things got bigger, bolder, more global in their structure based on what we revealed to you in our work, The Con, which everybody can find at www.thecon.tv. But what it leads you to understand is that The entire apparatus of the United States as a superpower had been undergirded by our special place as the world's reserve currency that took place first at Bretton Woods after World War II, and then later after Bretton Woods in 1971, when Nixon got us off the gold standard and created fiat currency. We could do that because we replaced gold with the commoditization of oil and other obviously resources and then capacity, like the ability to be a nuclear superpower. There's a lot of things that give us, you know, value and status as the world's reserve currency, not to mention everybody's buy-in, of course. But what happened after decades and decades of bigger and bigger frauds, of more financial systemic risk, what we ended up doing that nobody understands is that we provided the full faith and credit of the United States that is enabled through Federal Reserve Act 13.3 to provide emergency lending under exigent circumstances, which traditionally has been a response to natural disasters, potentially a world war, anything that would have to keep the United States afloat to continue moving forward with whatever basically you want to interpret as our power sort of apparatus, be it technology, be it resources, be it intellectual power, all of those types of things, right? What Federal Reserve Act 13.3 was not connotated to achieve was to provide tens of trillions of dollars backdoored illegally based on its own statutes that were written after the Great Depression, because all of these lessons were learned after the Great Depression, and what gave us the ability to create an economy that had checks and balances just like our government, as well as the law that would hold fraud to account, i.e. criminality. But that stopped after the entire world got leveraged following the great financial crisis, where we created and expanded a $4.5 trillion housing bubble in the United States into an $800 trillion global catastrophe vis-a-vis derivatives. And
in
that blew up,
2008.
blew up countries all over the world. And what we did was we publicly proclaimed that the way we were going to fix the system was by providing $700 billion in emergency lending apparatus that Congress mandated. Because as people are now starting to understand that Congress is supposed to have the power of the purse in the United States. But what we actually did was we backdoored tens of trillions of dollars illegally from the Federal Reserve that made Congress irrelevant. And that is exactly why we have billionaires and billionaire apparatuses that have been served literally socialism by the full faith and credit of the United States for what I call the mafiocracy that is now fueling fascism. So I guess what might be your response to that, X, given your knowledge of how things work?
Yeah, well, it's a yeah, of course. I don't have all the inside information, or I don't always see the same the things from the that kind of. It's a little bit new perspective the way you explained it now.
Well, I would,
But the big lines I already understood, of course.
right.
Yeah, how do I see it?
So
Well,
this is what I recommend, because I want to get a couple of people to comment on here, and on all of those of you who are on this call, please send me a request to speak, because I'd like to get your comments and to take this conversation further. And X, I'll circle back to you shortly. But thank
yeah,
you so much for chiming in. But I'd like to encourage you to go to our Prescient Work, which is the blueprint for how this works. And you can find that at www.thecon.tv. And then you can also find it at www.thecleannewdeal.org. I cite all of the information. Everything I just told you is there for the taking if people spend the time to endeavor themselves to see all of the evidence that exists. And then hopefully you have a cacophony where it's like, my God, the entire system has been lying to me the whole time, which you already know. But now I know the details of who did what, when, and how they got away with it. So on that note, somebody else, please put your hands up. Juan V, I know that, oh, requested. So I'm going to put you on standby speaker X, and then I'm going to get Juana in here to join the conversation, and we'll take it from there. So just stay
Yeah.
tuned, please. Or if you drop off, thank you so much for joining us. But I'm going to put you on mute for the moment, and then I'm going to get this next person on. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me? Nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to meet you.
So, what did you hear? What did you think about the dialogue I just had with X?
It's very informative. I like it.
Talk to me about where you're coming from and how you perceive what we're in the midst of, but also if you can also share with me kind of the information that you've been exploring through what I've been posting.
Uh, I'll be able to talk more in a second. Right now, I'm getting a Starbucks.
Okay.
I'm getting a coffee right now, but then they're going to open the window. I have to do that transaction. I'll put it on mute. But
well, I was going to say, let me put you on mute for just a second. You finish that. I'll get somebody else on, and I'll come back to you in just a minute. Okay.
I'll try to raise my hand or something.
Yes, please do.
Thank you, sir. Right.
Roseanne, if you can hear me, I need to see a request from you. Roseanne, are you listening, my friend? I think Roseanne's doing something else at the moment. Listener with the mask on, if you put your hand up, I'd love to have you chime in if you have anything that you'd like to add so far. Okay, we've got a couple of technical glitches, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep talking for a second, and then I'm going to revert back to Juan unless I see Roseanne's hand go up. So off the heels of what I've just laid out for Speaker X, again, what I want to reiterate is what I've been reiterating every day on X exponentially as much as I can to try to build an audience. What we're seeing in the United States is a befuddlement, a confoundry of people that, particularly in our media, that are acting as if A, they're somewhat surprised by the speed and the dexterity of this insanity by way of what we saw in the FBI last week, which was literally a purge last Friday night at the FBI, the most powerful police agency in the United States, and basically had a coup. And the question that I've been having towards the FBI is, how is it possible that those who have prescribed an oath to the Constitution and are the literally guns of law enforcement would be so easily overrun even before Kash Patel was nominated or confirmed to be the head of the FBI? Similarly, and a lot of us know more about this now than we did previously, but we had the hijacking of the Treasury, which is absolute insanity, by way of, and his name eludes me at the moment, the new hedge fund billionaire Secretary of the Treasury is basically the same kind of corrupt Wall Street executive that has been in the Treasury for the last, 20 years-ish. So when you capture the guns and you capture the Treasury, you've got full control of the United States. Now, they had already pulled off the corruption of the Supreme Court. And so for anyone at the moment thinking to themselves, I'm shocked. My God, how did they do this? What I'm telling you is they've been doing it all along. And who's they? The billionaire apparatus. They've been doing it for the past 14 years based on what I just introduced at the outset. There is no law in the United States as a result to billionaires and billionaire apparatuses. They can steal and be above the law where they're above the law and market forces, and they can basically do the P. Diddy rape and roofie of everything we think we are. So all Trump and Elon and all of the aspects of MAGA that have come together under the banner of, shall we say, Project 2025, they're just the final death knell in what it is that's been going on for decades, which we've known about since at least 2011. And so I'm going to just pop you in here, Roseanne, because we obviously had some. Actually, before I go to you, Roseanne, I'm going to go back to Juan and see if Juan has something he's ready to offer. Hold on a second.
Hello.
Juan, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Do you have some comments that you can share?
I just think everything you're talking about is very informative. I think people are looking for solutions. As far as myself goes, I've just been doing information exchange for many years. I do stuff in IT, and I've always been, since the times of, even before the internet, like a popular internet back in like 1993 and all that, from bulletin board systems and all this kind of stuff. But I've always been into like information exchange, into inputting information and getting it out, trying to get it out there, doing stuff like this. So, I mean,
well, I appreciate that. Right? I appreciate that. Let me put you on mute again because I'm gonna get that solution to you right now, and hopefully you'll listen to this, and then I'm gonna revert back to you. So, while I do that, so I'm gonna go to my colleague Roseanne Rabbiola-Mele, who's been with me in the trenches now for the last many years. And Roseanne, this is a great question for you to step into. We just had Juan say this is very informative, the information I'm providing, but what about the solutions, Roseanne? Yeah, I can finally.
Okay. All right. And I'm really gratified at the gentlemen who are with us today, because on X, Twitter, we generally do get responses and feedback from older women like myself. And I'm so pleased to hear the voices of men who I believe, just from their voices, may be in the generation that Patrick comes from. He comes from, what do you call yourself, Patrick?
X generation.
The X generation. Okay. I'm a boomer. I don't hear lots of X generation, intelligent, courageous men. I see lots of boomer women, but I'm glad our friend Speaker X from Belgium, Juan, I kind of think you may be a boomer, but here's the thing. What drew me to Patrick was the fact that I grew up in the 1950s, surrounded by a corrupt political system. I knew who the players were, but until I met Patrick 5 years ago, I didn't know the massive scope that the corruption took and the massive amounts of money that, starting with the Obama administration, through Trump, through Biden, but starting with the Obama administration, the trillions of dollars that were freely given to those who perpetrated the great financial crisis.
Now, wait a second. Roseanne, you might not have heard this because maybe you were muted or something else, but we covered a lot of that in the conversation so far. So I appreciate you doing that again. But the big stepping off point was the previous discussion we had with a gentleman that's on here by the name of Juan, who had mentioned that he is coming from tech, been in there the whole time, always about information and getting the truth out there and that sort of thing. He's very intrigued with the information that we've laid out. What he wants to know is the solutions.
Okay, here we go. If you look on the messages, I have the precepts laid out of the Clean New Deal.
Of which you get there by the 4 questions, please.
Okay. And you get there by saying, what is qualified immunity? Patrick, I'll let you elaborate.
That just means the police can shoot to kill without having to defend themselves in the court. So they're above the rule of law simply. And so this undergirded a lot of what was going on during Black Lives Matter. But it's a real problem that Americans don't understand that the police can kill and just say whatever they need to say in most districts based on insurance and all of the things that work out where some payouts might happen. But the long and the short of it is that puts the police above accountability. Please continue.
But I have to add this. So where was I? I was 19 years old and the head of the corrupt machine in Chicago said to the police, shoot to kill. So this is definitely not a new phenomenon. The next thing is, what is presidential immunity?
All right. So the presidential immunity, as we all saw with the recent decision about 6 months ago from SCOTUS, that gave the president basic immunity to be above the law, to do whatever is the role in the service of what many would regard as the Project 2025 CEO-ism of the presidency, of which they usurped the 14th Amendment, Section 3, written after the Civil War, that would exclude anybody who took part of insurrection and being an officer of the United States, let alone the chief executive officer. So there stymies the law right on its face, coming from the Supreme Court that just etch-a-sketched the entire history of the United States by knighting a king, which is exactly the whole reason we were born to begin with.
And what is the
judicial
Electoral College?
What is judicial immunity first? The judicial immunity does the same thing for the judges. So if the cops, the judges, and the president are above the law, then what's the law?
Yeah.
Okay. And so what was the final question of the 4 questions?
The Electoral College. What's the Electoral College do?
So the Electoral College is a perversion of democracy. Now, the founders obviously wanted to create separation of powers and the ability to slow down anybody who could become a monarch, because that's what they just had a revolution to prevent. And ultimately, the idea of the Electoral College, of course, as we all know, is that the United States is always baked in with a lot of contradictions, particularly the 3/5 statute, and that, we're all born equal, but at the same time, unless you're black or a woman. And it took hundreds of years through progressive movements to be able to create all of that, not to mention the Civil War in between, right? And so when you get to the bare bones of what the Electoral College is in 2025 or 2024 in the last election cycle, you got to put a couple of things into consideration here. First and foremost, when you have a state like Wyoming with an exorbitant amount of billionaires, they literally have as much legislative capacity as the state of California with 50 million residents. That's one perversion of the idea of democracy. But as what the Republicans always say is, we're a constitutional republic or a representative republic, which means, ruled by the minority, the learned class, the white gentry, or Jim Crow, or whatever the case is throughout our history. But it's a manipulative tactic to be able to sequester the majority vote. Now, to that point further, what we discovered was, I thought, some great work by someone I'm critical of all the time, but this work that she'd done was fantastic in so much of what it reveals. So Rachel Maddow did a podcast series called Ultra, which revealed the underbelly of America First that would lead to ultimately MAGA. But in that series, she had revealed a couple of things that I thought was incredible considering what she was in the midst of. So in the aftermath of the 2020 election, what we ultimately had was falsification of electoral signatures to steal the Electoral College through 11 states that turned into 11 criminal referrals that went to the Justice Department that wound up leading to Jack Smith's investigation, as well as what Fani Willis was involved with the racketeering aspect of the indictments on Donald Trump. Now, it was shocking to me to find out that that wasn't the first time that had actually happened. So in addition to the perversion of the rule by the majority through a democracy by a rule of the minority through lying, stealing, cheating, deceiving, censorship, or what Greg Palast's work has just revealed recently, which is of course suppressing the vote of African Americans as well as Latinos, which was they've audited it 3.5 million votes in the 2024 election, which would of course led Kamala to winning. All of these things are part of the same perversion of rule by the minority, but ultimately the manipulation, which we never even knew about it. I don't know about you, but I was never taught that Senator Joseph McCarthy, in running for the presidency, had a similar situation with America First, where they used falsification and forgeries of signatures of electoral college participants to steal the election. That's insane that we don't know that as a broader general consensus in the United States. And that furthers my point, by the way, that we are in the dark about how democracy works, because democracy isn't democracy, which is what we say on the front of our Clean New Deal. You don't live in a democracy. It's ridiculous. And all of these nuances are absolute bullshit. So please continue, Roseanne, with the precepts of the Clean New Deal.
Certainly. What we need to do first is to recreate a modern day Glass-Steagall Act, which President Clinton did away with for modernity's sake, where we have to separate commercial banking from investment banking. We cannot let banks play with other people's money.
More importantly, play with other people's money, but that would lead to massive global carnage through insane racketeering, but that's ultimately guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the United States. That's what I'm revealing to the American people, that they pulled a backdoor in secret meetings, 98 secret meetings to be exact, where the head of the Fed, the head of the Treasury, and the head of the let's see, I'm thinking of
Bernanke.
Bernanke was the head of the Fed. Of course, I know the secretary, because we had two secretary of the Treasuries that were involved. That's why, because it happened at the turn of Bush to Reagan. So, I mean, Bush to Obama. So ultimately, yeah, we learned these lessons after the Great Depression, where we created the Securities and Exchange Commission, and then we created a Glass-Steagall Act to where you couldn't gamble with other people's money. The caveat now is that you can't have backstopped by the full faith and credit of the United States. Sounds really stupid to people who could follow the bouncing ball. Where in the right minds would anybody say that that would be a remote possibility? No one would, but that's exactly what we did. So please continue.
Then we need to end Citizens United, which is simply legalize corruption by dark money. Gotta stop. And so many people agree with that. So why don't we unite and make it happen?
And another thing to kind of point out in terms of popular culture recently about what happens in the dark, right? Nothing good happens in the dark. I mean, sometimes fun things can happen in the dark, but what happens in the dark with P. Diddy wasn't a bunch of people going to have fun and be seen at parties so that they could network and maybe be, discovered and that sort of thing. They were literally roofied and thrown in dark rooms where they were trained, ass raped, so they could be controlled. That's what the billionaire class has done with dark money and Citizens United. They basically raped and pillaged, they roofied, raped, and pillaged the entirety of what we are supposed to be, i.e., the supremacy of law and separation of powers. Please continue.
We can demonstrate how the $71 trillion was looted illegally by our financial system that betrayed our institutions, betrayed the people. It propped up the billionaires and all those billionaire apparatuses. It foisted them above the law and market forces, while at the same time rewarding them for betraying tens of millions of Americans through a monumental global criminal racketeering ring. And they were using our financial and our judicial systems to do this. Right there, right in front of everybody. There is, and I believe everyone would agree with this, a better way to spend $71 trillion than on corruption that benefits criminals in suits with no shame, a minuscule percentage of our country.
That was a very powerful argument. And to further that context, guys, what you need to understand and what we discovered in our work, The Con, was that everybody acknowledges that there was at least 10 million filed foreclosures in the United States. Now, what people don't understand was a vast majority of these, and this is all cited material, and I got this from all of my research and the thousands of hours that I had to put into The Con, as well as the millions of dollars to make this thing all happen, that we've then provided to the American people for free because all the American people buy our lies. And that this is the entire system that, I mean, the entire story that all of media, including our friends Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell, whom I respect and appreciate, but they get paid the millions of dollars they do to hyper-focus on Trump, not the trillion-dollar apparatus of fraud within our financial system that gave birth to Trump and also gave him the opportunity, even though Trump has been breaking the law for 4 decades. So we know that there was a minimum of 10 million filed foreclosures. I've got information that say it was as high as 16 million. These were 80% by what we've learned from the Federal Crisis Inquiry Commission were created by what we called liar's loans. Liar's loans are what maybe many of you saw during the movie The Big Short, where they were supposedly pawning off all of these different houses to strip dancers. Yeah, ridiculous things happen like that, but it wasn't the fault of the strip dancers. The strip dancers were just taking advantage of an opportunity just like everybody else, because what we learned was through modern executive compensation and what control fraud is, which created the savings and loan crisis, of which my mentor put 1,800 white-collar executives in prison for, understanding this methodology. The bottom line is that all of the loans that were given out were what we call ninja loans between 2004 and 2006 that were basically no income, no asset. And then there were lies every step of the way in the pipeline of which is supposed to preserve the sanctity and the integrity of the housing market. So you had the brokers lying, you had the appraisers lying, you had the consumer, what am I talking about? What goes up the food chain here? I said appraisers, the real estate agents, really everybody in the pipeline, but most importantly, the appraisers, because the whole thing is based on appraisal fraud that would then lead to the credit bureaus that got involved, not the credit bureaus, but the the credit rating agencies. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I got jammed up on that. The credit rating agencies were all playing the exact same game. But what we're talking about here, guys, is we're talking about tens of millions of felonies, okay? Now, I got to put this into further context in terms of what the United States versus Donald Trump just revealed in the 91 indictments that did not derail Trump from winning the presidency, most likely because he stole it and voter suppression. That notwithstanding, basically the United States said in a nutshell that there were 91 criminal indictments based on falsification of business records to defraud the United States using forgeries and all methodology of these mechanics of what I've just laid out, which we show you in detail in the con. That's been Trump's business model the whole time. But further to that, Eric Holder's Department of Justice 14 years ago, well, it was more like 12 years ago now, but they admitted in all of the civil penalties, every single thing that I'm telling you. You can go look it up in all of the civil settlements. They say, the Department of Justice, that they acknowledge the ninja loans, they acknowledge the methodology, they acknowledge everything the Federal Crisis Inquiry Commission had touchstone upon, but they didn't take it to indictments at the Department of Justice because they decided to do settlements. Now, there's a whole nother story of the settlements, but it was a big PR campaign where the banks paid $250 billion for defrauding the United States. But they got away with $71 trillion during the same time period. Okay. And I could broach that again. But what we're trying to tell you guys, and what we've got cited, we've got the evidence, we've got everything that the Department of Justice and the attorneys generals of the United States and the Securities and Exchange Commission, when you put their sum total of budgets together, they've got over $90 billion a year in budgets. They've got tens of thousands of employees. They could not do the work for the American people because they were corrupt. Now, you got to ask yourself, how is it possible that we could have a Treasury Secretary that would allow the world's richest guy to go take over the Treasury to stop payments to the most vulnerable in society and, quite frankly, around the world? And oh, yeah, by the way, the U.S. aid is like 1% of our federal budget, and the Pentagon's like 50% of the national budget. But let's not worry about that. Let's just worry about the fraud we think we're going to set up. But meanwhile, Elon Musk and company have been getting tens of trillions of dollars illegally from the system that I'm revealing to you for the past 14 years. It's why, for example, Elon Musk went from initially, I think we're like 100-something billion in the age of COVID, to doubling and tripling his net worth at that point because of everything I'm laying out here, because of meme stocks and all the other pump and dump schemes and all of the insider trading and all of the rest of it. But then on top of it, it's the tax policy and yada, yada, yada. It all stems from the same story. And so what I'm trying to get people to understand, we're trying to get people to understand, is that we can give you a detailed inside look at literally $71 trillion that was stolen between 2014 and, let's say, 2019. And it did continue after the fact, and there's more to it than that. But that's what we've cited. And the question you have to ask yourself, if you have the context, that our GDP is $25 trillion a year. This is insanity that $71 trillion went to maybe roughly 300,000 individuals in the financial system to build this unbelievable billionaire monstrosity that is doing a P. Diddy freak off on the law and on market forces. So it's not capitalism. It's criminalism that has a backstop of socialism for the billionaire class. That's the con. So moving forward, is there $71 trillion better spent considering climate change and systemic prisons and whatever issue that you may have? Yeah, I think that's self-evident, and it's not rhetorical. But beyond that, the question is, where are we going to find the money? Well, you got to understand that the money is always there because we're a sovereign currency. Yes, inflation happens if you don't manage it correctly. It's all based on productive capacity, but you can't go any further into we've got a $33 trillion federal deficit and a $33 trillion personal credit deficit, without understanding the fact of sovereign currency and productive capacity. It's just what we've created was a pipeline to criminals. They're the ones who get the free money with no downside. That's the reality. Please continue, Roseanne.
The next thing is expand the Supreme Court to 13 justices. And the big deal is enforce a canon of ethics to make the corrupt justices accountable to the law.
Clarence Thomas, a grandson and great-grandson of slaves, was responsible because he got married to a woman who was owned by the Koch brothers that did the bidding of Harlan Crow, a white supremacist neo-Nazi, not to mention Leonard Leo and all the rest of them. People, the corruption should have led to an absolute, outpouring of millions of people 6 months ago to surround the Supreme Court because of the levity of corruption. The fact that we're in 2025 after the fact is insane. It's you can't beat corruption after you've already gotten the House, both sides of the House and the Supreme Court. That battle has been lost. So the long game is for everybody to get the information we're getting, to understand it, because it's going to take millions of us united to be able to overcome the corruption and fascism that has absolute control. Please continue.
And qualified immunity with these police doing what they wish. What they wish is not serving the public. You don't serve and protect the public when you, the police, can do whatever you wish.
Now, interestingly enough, Roseanne, think about this. The police, the Capitol Police, didn't shoot to kill the insurrectionists, did they?
Nope.
But if they did, they could have gotten away with it. Except, of course, MAGA would have a lot more balls than the rest of the United States does at the moment to hold them accountable, obviously. But that's another story. The fact of the matter is, yeah, you got to end qualified immunity because nobody's supposed to be above the law. You got to end judicial immunity because nobody's above the law. You can't have presidential immunity because with the United States of America that had the Civil War, the war on fascism and civil rights and 248 years of history that said we are not a land of kings. And then ultimately you have to purge the Electoral College. And there's two other points that I might chime in on that Biden, I call him Neville Chamberlain, who shook hands with the insurrectionist in office while then having the nerve to tell us, oh yeah, you live in an oligarchy on his way out. When who was making the argument the whole time? Me, by the way, Roseanne, by the way, and those of us on our side. But ultimately, Biden say two things that I thought of merit. You've got to end the ability of Congress to have insider trading. And then, of course, you have to have term limits for these guys like Mitch McConnell, who could work behind the scenes to get a Supreme Court led by Justice Roberts that allowed the corruption and Justice Alito flying the upside down flag, in service of a white supremacist revolution. That's not the United States that I believe in, that I grew up understanding, and everything that we have had has been turned upside down, inside out. And so, Roseanne, make a closing comment, and then I'm going to reach back out to all of these guys to see if anybody wants to chime in.
My closing comment would be that unless and until we have the facts, which we have been, people have validated everything that Patrick has put together in the con. So you watch the con, you must have the facts, you must have what you can call the armor to make yourself bulletproof so that you can effectively fight against and purge the corruption. You don't go into battle unarmed. So what do you need? You need the facts so that you can fight effectively. these precepts are all interconnected with every single issue we want to fight for. We want to fight for good housing, jobs, prison reform, education. It doesn't make LGBTQ rights, no matter what it is. Everything is connected to the money, which gives I call them the big boys, the power. You cut off their money, you weaken their power.
So let me just finish off on that, and I'm going to ask all of you to please raise your hand so I can get you to comment on what you've heard so far. But the final piece of the equation of what do we have to do? Look, there's been sporadic demonstrations all around the country that are now coming together, some of which in Washington, D.C., some led by the Democrats, some at the Treasury, some, basically going after Musk and, his ilk and, these silly meme names like Big Balls and all the rest of it, right? But what I've seen for the last 14 years is that people are in silos. So, for example, if trans is your issue, that's your issue. If Black Lives Matter is your issue, that's your issue. If the environment is your issue, that's your issue. If Me Too is your issue, that's your issue. If all of these things together, separately are your issue, and you can't kind of see the forest through the trees, that money is what controls everything. And MAGA is on the same page. It's white supremacy, as it always has been, right? It's patriarchy slash, white supremacy, Confederate state, and then ultimately the era of kings kind of thing, whatever. So they've been able to pull this off, and it's always been underneath, the surface of the United States. We've had Jim Crow to John Birch to America First to the Koch initiative, Americans for Prosperity, see the prosperity that would lead to, of course, MAGA. And they've always been incredibly organized. And what I'm telling you is that unless you understand how the billionaire class looted $71 trillion to pull out skull fucking of the United States, a rape and pillage, that's all they did. Lie, deny, switch the blame. They're the fraternity guys that got a couple of vulnerable ladies in their snare, and then they all gang raped her, roofied her, gang raped her, threw her in the garbage, and they lied about it. That's what I feel has happened to Lady Liberty, honestly. And so what we have to do is we have to get the truth to millions of people. They have to understand that we have the evidence. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't me pretending I know what I'm talking about. I've spent millions of dollars and thousands of hours to get this information that is the sum total. I mean, that's a hell of a great return if you think about it. But we had to give this to people for free because people just buy lies. Look at what Fox Media had gotten away with $700 million to just, basically defame, the Dominion Energy, Dominion voting booths. And what happened to Fox? Nothing, right? I mean, they've realized that cost of doing business is very good when you lie, steal, and deceit, and you own the mechanics of the government that could hold them to account. That's all it is. It's tyranny 101. And so in the sort of clean New Deal effort to purge the misery of tyranny, to create a renaissance of possibility, what we have to do is we got to get everybody informed, and then we've got to get everybody active to where we have obviously pockets of people all over the country rallying around the Clean New Deal, but we have got to get millions of people to DC and surround the Supreme Court, surround the Department of Justice, surround the Securities and Exchange Commission, surround the White House, surround Congress. And I might be missing, am I missing anything? Did I say the Federal Reserve? I didn't say the Federal Reserve. Surround the Federal Reserve. And everybody then basically, this is a peaceful demonstration. This isn't MAGA. This is us saying the jig is up. We've got the information. And then we roll as a tidal wave, an exodus from corruption to the Washington Mall underneath the gaze of Abraham Lincoln, who said that a nation of by and for the people shall not perish from the earth, and across the reflecting pool from Martin Luther King, who said the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, where I laid this information out with all of the people that can validate it, that are the real whistleblowers. I'm not the savior. the truth is. I'm the deliverer who got all of this information and all of the people as a muckraking journalist when nobody from the New York Times to the Washington Post to the rest of society failed to deliver. And that's why I'm asking you guys to understand that if you have one voice that comes from me, that when we unite, it's you plus me equals everyone you see to defeat the tyranny of fascism. And so on that note, will you please put your hands up, anybody who is interested to make a comment? No, Roseanne, let the silence sit there for a minute. Does anybody want to respond, please, to the information you just heard? Do you want to challenge it? Do you want to inform us that something landed or is confusing, or if you have any questions, or if you doubt something? We're more than happy to interact and engage any questions. Okay, Juan, I'm going to get you on here. Hi, Juan. Juan, I think I allowed you to speak there. Can you, yeah, I don't have you on silent. You should be good to go, bud. Oh, and Reagan, I added you as well. Reagan, are you there? So I've got two people that have requested to speak, but for some reason we've got some technical glitch because it says on my end that
Just
they
unmute. They have to unmute their mics.
Guys, can you see if your mic is muted? Hi, is that you, Juan? Yeah, please, if you're ready to speak, we'd love to hear from you.
That I love the vision. I think that'd be awesome to do all that. So that's how be able to get those different. How many points? 10 points. Besides sending Elon to Mars, but which is the 11th point, but 10 different things to be legislated for the legislators to be able to make these things to go into effect, or are they not all actually all legislature wise?
Well, you asked the right question, because none of this can happen unless you have a Congress that's willing to enact all this stuff and a president that's willing. So can all of this stuff be achieved right now? No. Could it by the midterms? Potentially. Now, we just have to, like, here's my argument about the Democrats, by the way. None of the Democrats are going to ever recognize what I'm telling you, because they allowed, and this goes for Bernie Sanders and this goes for Elizabeth Warren, they allowed President Obama's presidency to do this deal with Wall Street that enabled all of this grift to happen in the courts, that enabled MAGA. So the Democrats aren't legitimate by way of trying to defeat corruption, is my point.
Oh, okay, so but what about that whole thing about Bernie today? He was saying some really good stuff about the oligarchs. Is he not?
No. To your point, and I agree with you, Bernie's always said the most fantastic stuff. So just to put it in perspective, I did a film, my first film was Forward 13, Waking Up the American Dream. And I did it as a result of coming out of the great financial crisis, and I surfed the Occupy Wall Street movement from coast to coast. And I gave Bernie the closing argument. And Bernie in my film said almost the exact same thing 14 years ago that he did Friday and he did today. He's never wavered in saying the exact same thing. The difference between me and Bernie is I'm delivering the details of what Bernie continues to gloss over. Now, you can fill in the blanks of why Bernie might do that. I've got my own thoughts. I've been close and personal with his staff. I wanted Bernie in my first film. That's why I ended up having to put his speech from the floor of the House in the film instead. But Bernie and Elizabeth have not been all in on taking down the corruption that they've identified. It's a Faustian bargain, and it's also a chameleon deal that politicians have been doing for my whole lifetime. So, do I discount Bernie Sanders as a guy that I would put on the wrong-headed list? No. But at the same time, please hear what I'm saying. I provided the details that Bernie never has. Now, by the way, Bernie did get not interviewed, when he ran for presidency in 2016, and I thought he was going to win. I was hoping he was going to win because he was actually being advised by two people that both Roseanne and I are familiar with, a woman by the name of Stephanie Kilton, who was his economic advisor. But he also had William K. Black, who was my mentor, who was the guy who put away 1,700 white-collar executives in the savings and loan crisis, which was much, much smaller than the 2008 great financial crisis. He got the famous line that he said during the debate with Hillary Clinton on the 2016 election in Brooklyn when he said, Wall Street's business model is fraud. But nobody ever followed up and asked him what was fraud. And you could have heard a pin drop. And he never made the case of what I'm giving you the details on. And that's part and parcel to the whole problem. Do you have a response to that or a question about that?
No, I was just making the observation of what he said today. I didn't catch the whole part. I got most of it, but it was really interesting what he was talking about. I just mentioned about him. It doesn't mean that he would participate in something like that, as far as that goes. So I just mentioned about it, but also about the craziness that Elon's doing, like he changed his name today to Harry Bowles or whatever. He thinks it's a joke, but people who aren't mentally stable, they could make certain choices because somebody's doing something. I mean, he's fomenting, in my mind, like global terrorism. So I'm just like sick of the guy. What is he doing? He's the one who's like he's got all this money. He's a billionaire. He's like sitting there trying to control our government. What's going on?
How do you feel about what I told you about Elon literally got billions of dollars by the system I'm telling you while he's using it to control and destroy people that are the most vulnerable? How does that make you feel?
It doesn't make me happy at all. It pisses me off.
Well, I hope
peace and all that stuff, and I think we should all organize, and I like your vision. My thing is, I'm not in a silo. My silo is time binding. That covers everything. You know what I'm saying?
that's cool.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's cool. No, and I appreciate that. And I would encourage you to join us, and hopefully you can spread the word. And if you have any questions or more details that you need to help you further wrap your head around it and how you might play a role in this, we would love to have you on because everybody has to be a nuclear reaction to the Big Bang of truth that I'm dropping. And I'll say this, and I always say this, I like to speak in like these metaphors, but the universal truth is literally that the light overcomes darkness with the power of the supernova. That's energy, right? Okay, we could talk about the physics and the cosmology and yada, yada, yada. But the fact of the matter is that is the universal construct. And so this is the truth. And so I always tell people, and everybody knows this, because intuitively this is how we all have to think in this grand composite of our lives. But when you live in truth, you live in light. When you lie, you're depraved. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. When you lie, inside you die. So we're saying the light of justice and liberty and justice is what we're trying to get to in the Clean New Deal that gives you all these details. So hopefully that resonates with you guys. Hey, Reagan, I see that you're on here. Can I get you to chime in from Canada and tell us some of the things that you're hearing in this conversation and how you feel?
Thanks, Patrick. Sure. Patrick, I'm up here in Canada, and I'd say that Patrick's one of my mentors, and what he has to say may sound nice, but you may be skeptical. But my work up here in Canada stands on his shoulders. What he discovered about the financial games at the heart of the modern world is what I eventually discovered is afoot up here. The same corruption found up here, find that they're connected, and it's all thanks to Patrick's tenacity and integrity that are the rarest of ingredients out there to be sustained long enough to cut through the BS to the confidence, the intellectual self-defense required to have the confidence to stand up to these forces is what Patrick has, exemplifies, personifies, and he's trying to give us this gift. And as difficult as it is to believe, it offers the solution that this is a crime. It's not that we're not smart enough. And I just wanted to offer a sort of confirmation of all that you're saying, that I've seen it true up here in Canada. Absolutely.
Wow. And I want to say my heart goes out to you, Reagan. That just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I'm so grateful for your confidence and um, your vocalization of why people should pay attention to the information that I'm providing. See, what the rest of you really need to understand is that I've been a producer for over 25 years. I've been in the vein of Hollywood, and I know the business inside and out. I've worked at the highest levels with some of the most well-known people, but I set off on my own adventure to try to really put all of these pieces together, and it's antithetical to the power structure that really molds communication in this country. So I've been inside the belly of the beast, but what I didn't discover until many years later, and this goes for Reagan up in Canada as well, particularly in Alberta, because many of you might kind of understand this corollary. But what Reagan has revealed to me was that the Rockefellers, which is the most powerful oil interest in the United States that would lead to Standard Oil, and of course everything through trust busting that would then become ExxonMobil and all the rest, have always had their fingers inside Alberta, which is the world's largest oil reserve through the tar sands on the planet. That also acts as collateral for the global financial system, but particularly our sovereign wealth, our sovereign position as the world's reserve currency. So I kind of confuse things there. We have sovereign currency, but we're also the world's reserve currency. But that's a huge part of this puzzle, as well as the United States and Trump going all things, given all of the climate problems that we've been aware of since the 70s, not problems, the end of life as we know it on the planet problems. I mean, we're talking about the end of the line here, folks. And it's not 1970, it's not 1980, it's not 2000, it's freaking 2025, people. And yet what we're providing to you is this undergirded structure that reveals how the system works. And it's just not in the United States, it's around the globe because of what we're talking about. Now, interestingly enough, to that point, many of you might be familiar with the idea of BRICS. Now, BRICS became a connotation that was literally created by Goldman Sachs to just put an investment portfolio on investments in China, Brazil, Russia, India, and of course, South Africa, right? And then I think we're kind of throwing in Saudi Arabia now, skewed that way. Now, because of globalization and because of what we've done as the middleman through this financialization over the course of the neoliberal era, 50 plus years post Bretton Woods, basically, is that they're all kind of hip to the game now. And that's why we have also, I could get into this conversation about crypto and blockchain and some of these other things that are now all over the place with Elon, which is central bank digital currency, and where he started with PayPal Mafia. But that's kind of besides where we are at the moment. That's just kind of periphery to this whole thing. But yeah, when you think about currency and you think about global trade, it's always been about, and same with wars, who has the resources, who has the ability, who has the people power, who has the methodology to move what the globe needs to be able to create the products that, of course, we all need, right? And so that's globalism in a nutshell. But we've seen a splinter in this right-wing movement, which is theocracies and religious theocracies, and also the kind of the cabal of the Putin / I'm going to call it white, globalism. It's just the opposite. It's the global cabal that Alex Jones pretends like he's against when he's getting paid by, right? It's all absurd. So where am I going with this as it relates to where we are at this moment, right? They've been involved with this sort of smash and grab reverse looting of the United States, which I think we're kind of in a way getting what we deserve. But yet everybody's playing the game of the billionaires. That's how the billionaires roll. Nothing is sacred. Everyone is expendable but themselves. And so at the end of the line of the Clean New Deal is I'm not expendable, and I know you're not either. But if we join forces and we merge and we have this bulletproof truth that can show why things are corrupt the way they are, and that these billionaires walked with $71 trillion, we can reboot not just the American dream and the American governance of democracy and separation of powers, I think we can reboot what hopefully would be a shared values of commonality. And I want to address the fact that we've got Reagan from Canada on here, and we've got a gentleman by X from Belgium. So that just furthers. And by the way, I do get comments all the time from people all around the world that are completely in solidarity with what I'm professing. And what I find out just nauseatingly weird is if people around the world can discover this, where the hell are the American people? So I would like to ask X if you're there to maybe make some final comments here. And I see that we got Eric Boyer here as well. Eric, I don't know when you came in. Looks like you bolted. But X, if you would like to make some comments, would love to hear your final thoughts.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's clearly you know what you were talking about, and of course, if you want to find a cure, you first have to know the how the disease works or is. So I think there are many good views on how the mechanics of the system is working and where the mistakes are or where it's going wrong. But I'm not exactly sure how how you can make a change or switch back to another system, because I think now it's like we are in a moment globally where the tip is going to more to the negative side than the positive side. I mean, the change first. I think first things are going to get worse before they are going to get better.
Well, and I appreciate that, and that's usually how it goes. From where I'm sitting, it's been really bad for a very long time. But I do want to address that one point to you, and then Eric, I see you've requested, and I'll pipe you in here in just a moment. But in our nation's history, we've always had progressive movements. Now, whether you want to talk about, we could all get into the intricacies of, where things fell short, from the 3/5 statute, during the American Revolution and the Compromise and all of the rest of it. But when you look specifically also at the post-Civil War period, where we started to see populist movements in the United States rise between laborers and agriculture farmers at that time against the monopolies of the railroad barons and so forth. But then that gave credence to the suffrage movement, that gave credence to a civil rights movement, that gave credence to an environmental rights movement. All of those things configured into the first element that was the trust busting time period of Teddy Roosevelt, which of course, he kind of rode to glory, but at the same time, it manifested what ultimately became trust busting. That set the ledger, if you will, for what would go on to become the New Deal. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which is of course Teddy Roosevelt's cousin, right? And both of those came from the aristocracy class, but yet they did recognize, the mechanics of, in order to form a country of by and for the people. They took the power out of the hands of the oligarchs. That's what they did. And now we're in a similar situation, and it's an American tradition, but we can't see the forest for the trees because media writ large, particularly all of the insanity through social media and the algorithms and the fake bots and the propaganda and all of the things that have been manifested through X, which is the worst of what we've seen for the last 20 years in conservative echo chamber media. So yeah, Joseph Goebbels would have been smiling watching what Elon Musk is pulling off in the platform globally right now. This is the truth that can take it all down, but only if millions of people refuse to be separate on specific issues and find common ground that this is just a criminal enterprise, that we the people need to restore the integrity of law to take these motherfuckers down. Okay, so Eric, on that note, I'd like to ask you to speak. And I'm going to give you an option, or I'm going to add you right now. Eric, I look forward to your thoughts.
Hey, you guys there?
Yep.
Hey, sorry about that. I'm just turning on my mic for the first time on my phone.
Sure.
Um, what I was gonna say? I'll try to make this quick. Um, you're talking about the light and the way that when you're in the light, you're in the right, basically. And when you're in the dark, you're telling lies. Um, and I want to. I'm not a religious guy, but I do go back to the Bible, which is a lot of it is history, at least from the Jesus
True.
end of it. Like that, the New Testament is a historical, account of what happened. And this guy came down, he was like, all you got to do is love each other. That's it. The Ten Commandments didn't really work out too much. So all you got to do is love your fellow man like you love yourself. That's it. That's all I'm asking. And they couldn't believe that who the hell is this guy. Again, I claim no denomination. I don't go to church. I'm just a spiritual guy, I guess, but I'm more a historian than anything. And this like he all along he's saying I'm the light, and you can see it throughout the Bible or whatever that they fucked up. That nobody believed him, and he went back to heaven. Blessed the guys that were in followed him, and then the world was screwed for the next 20,000 or 2,000 years. I don't know about that, but I think what I'm trying to get at is hope, and that's how you unite. I mean, you look around. There's an African American movement. Like everybody is fucking tired, and everybody is seeing this shit. You have all the details, and you can break it down, man. But like everybody is like, I just feel a shift coming. Like I can't explain it. I just know that I have hope in the human being and in all of you guys. Um, and I don't have hope in evil, because you know evil tends not to win. Oh, and at best, they have a horrible, horrible life. Like I mean, how do you live that life? So, anyway, I guess that's it. I have like 15 other things, but um, I'll cut it off short to be respectful of your time.
Well,
Um,
I really appreciate your comments, Eric, and thank you so much for
oh,
joining on here. Folks, look, what
r-
Eric
r-
touched what Eric touched upon is really interesting from this perspective for me. So I'm not very religious either, but I always use kind of religious iconic metaphors, I guess is the easiest way to describe it. Sometimes it just makes simple connections. And the thing about Jesus's time that I've learned from, let's call it historic Jesus, right, is that at the time period, Passover, which was Exodus, which was Moses, of course, which is the Ten Commandments, which was literally Deuteronomy and Leviticus, which is the law. The idea is that by the time you get to Jesus, you get to the situation where they've recognized corruption and looting and deception and all of those types of things, especially that preyed upon the most
poor.
vulnerable, right? And so this has been an odyssey of over several thousand years, and it goes back 5,000 years in terms of the story. And so I always use the sort of kind of analogies like, just to bring it to my generation. I was a big 80s music guy, and I loved the Talking Heads and David Byrne, and I think of him as a kind of a prophet of sorts. But his line was same as it ever was. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's just deception and diabolical betrayal is what power does. And what Roseanne and I continue to reveal to the American people and the world who's listening is that we discovered this really in 17th century France by, Bastiat, who was a
Hmm.
libertarian philosopher who said when a group of men discover plunder, they create a legal code to authorize
To
it and a
steal
moral
it.
code to glorify it. And that was what led to ultimately the French Revolution, right? And
Right.
then many years later, my sort of 90s movie depiction of it is the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he
It's the
didn't
world.
exist.
Yeah.
And what that's all about is just people in the shadows this is history. This is what it's all about. But
Yeah.
when you put trillions of dollars in the pie and you get really smart people that know the law and they can manipulate, they can lie to you all day long. And so that's what we've been living under for 14 years. And
And
what
the
the
thing
what,
is the money even real? Like fiat currency and all that stuff. Like
yeah, it
we
is.
just say what it is.
No, it is real because of this capacity. And I'm going to put you on mute for just one
All
second
right,
because
yeah,
I'm
yeah, let
yeah,
me. Yeah, I'll get.
just for a second, just because I want to make this point. And then I want to finish this up because I know we're busy and we've got other things to do. But and boy, and I'm not trying to cut you off, Eric, but I really appreciate your point. But I want to answer fiat currency right now, guys. Yes, of course, currency is real. It has value. It's all also about all the full faith and the full faith of people that use it. Now, in the United States and every other country, you have to use dollars if you want to go buy groceries. So it's kind of a necessity. But again, whether fiat currency can be printed into existence, but it also is based on productive capacity, which incorporates resources, not just natural resources that we all need, whether it's the commoditization of whatever our energy is, lumber, timber, technology, X, Y, and Z, not to mention the university structures that give us the opportunity to, explore new bounds in medicine and all the rest of it. When the system works, it works well. It doesn't work if you have criminal apparatuses that are not accountable because they'll steal it. So what we've done with this fiat currency and what I'm revealing to the world, quite frankly, Eric, is that we've created socialism for the billionaire class because we can pump tens of trillions of dollars, and we have illegally, to these bastards that are above the law and market forces. So yes, we're in new territory, but we've been in this territory now for at least 14 years. But what's happening with Elon Musk and everything else is really the death knell because nobody knows this stuff and nobody knows what they're trying to do. And there's been a lot of confused people that have had their lives destroyed over the course of decades where they're looking to people like Trump, where it's like, who cares? It doesn't matter anymore because they're not going to be the system that already fucked me. Let somebody new try to do it and see what happens. What Trump has been up to his entire existence is the same fraud that I'm revealing to you. He's been a criminal the whole time. And so when you get to the end of the game here, guys, just like the Roman Empire, just like really every aristocracy throughout history, and you look at this, it's literally thousands of years of the same human tragedy. It's corruption. Every single time war empires fail, it's because the systems fail and they fail to hold power to account, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is the Shakespearean tragedy. This is the tragedy, so I could go on and on and on. We're all here. You guys have stayed on long enough. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. All of you who have participated today, I want to thank you for hearing us. I hope you'll render your judgment by participating and joining us, spreading the word. I am always available for questions. Roseanne Rabiola Amile is always available for questions. We have got to create an army of millions of people that will not bend the knee and yield to corruption and fascism. Now, if love is the thing that guides you to that point forward, that's fabulous. I appreciate that. I follow in the same vein, I'd like to think, in terms of trying to create a civil rights movement, even though, of course, I'm not Martin Luther King, nor would I ever dream to be. I'm not Martin Luther King because I'm not a pacifist either. I do believe that he was a prophet, and I believe that everything he said merited everything that this country should aspire to. But I do think that about a lot of people in our country's history for all of their flaws. And I'm flawed too. I'm certainly not perfect. Again, I want to remind you guys, never think I'm ever putting myself above anybody else. I am not the savior, but I am the deliverer because we did the work, and this is all bulletproof. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't philosophy. This isn't theory. These are evidentiary facts of the way the system worked, which is illegal. Now, the question you have to ask yourself now, because we all know that what Elon Musk is doing is illegal, but then you have to understand therein lies the reality. Who's going to stop him? And that's the conundrum we've got on our hands. So until next time, guys, I thank you all. Does anybody have any closing comments that you'd like? Just please raise your hand if you have anything else to add. Looks like everybody's good for now. Thank you all for listening, and please share this. I'm going to end this now. To you all, onwards and upwards.